Yo, dog.
What's up, Pancho Sanza? How are you?
Another great one. Good. What are we doing? What are we doing for this week?
Well, I thought we would do something on something the world needs, which is authenticity. We should do one on authenticity.
Oh, wait, hold on one second. I gotta finish up this TikTok. I'm posting about how to be a beauty pageant queen.
Okay, so you need this episode as much as everybody else, apparently. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. I'm gonna do my dance and tell everyone how to, how to put on a persona for the world.
There you go.
Let's get right into this. No, I like the authenticity. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it, man. All right. Well, I'll see you in the studio on Thursday.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
In a world of filters, curated social media feeds, and constant pressure to conform, authenticity can feel like a rare commodity, and many of us struggle with the question, am I being true to myself or am I just playing a role I think others want to see?
And if we are wearing masks more often than not, how do we get free of the feeling that we need to fit into somebody else's idea of how we should be in the world and start living life as who we really are?
Today on the show, we are tackling authenticity. Related to that, we'll also be talking about shedding expectations and setting boundaries around other people's opinions so that you can be more like your true self more of the time. So if you're ready for takeoff,
let's go. All right, Nora, today on the show, we are talking about authenticity, and this is another one of our hat trick shows. So we're going to add in also shedding expectations and talk about other people's opinions and how to set boundaries around those so you can live a more authentic life. And again, this comes from, feedback that we've gotten on the show and questions that people have about what we've talked about before. And so we decided to wrap these three subjects up into one gift for you. And we're going to talk about how you can be more authentic today. What do you have to say about that? Yeah.
Right. What I have to say about that is, with OPP. Other people's problems, other people's opinions. That's what running through my head. Yeah. Let's tackle authenticity, which I think is something we hear all the time in our current culture, especially like when it comes to online personas. There's often a call for people to say, like, we want more transparency and authenticity from people. And I think for a lot of people, they don't really necessarily entirely know what that means and what that entails. So
no, and when you look at the social media landscape, especially when you're talking about YouTube personalities and things like that, so many of them are not really authentic in a lot of ways. I mean, It's very, very curated. It's very, very pointed toward monetizing videos, and it's very formulaic like that. People like Mr. Beast will be the first one to tell you that there's a formula to making money, or Casey Neistat or any of those guys who are super famous on YouTube. And that's what they follow to do it, down to their editing, their music choices, their cover photos, all of that stuff. And I'm not saying that that's completely unauthentic. It's good to have a system, but I find it less authentic than perhaps somebody who's just speaking from the heart, or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, I kind of go back and forth in my head with this, in particular when it comes to social media, or we can see even in science that things change the way they operate when they are being observed, when they know they're being observed, right? And so I think there are a lot of people who have spent a very good deal of time building a persona or a brand. Then they have about, digging deep and finding out like what really makes them tick and what they actually believe about themselves and the world around them. So I think there are a lot of people who call for authenticity who don't even really understand what that actually means.
Less and less, I think, because you talk to kids these days, and these kids at 13, 14 years old talk about kids these days. These kids these days with their fancy flip phones and all that stuff. No, it's you're right. I did sound like old man yells at cloud right there.
Yeah. Someone's gonna call you
it's good
out
to call me out on that. No, I wasn't gonna crap on the kids that much, other than the fact that they're just being pressured to create a personal brand so early in life. So they're being pressured to put on a mask as soon as they get a phone, because if you don't, you suffer the slings and arrows of your peers, scorn a lot of the time, or trolls
Right.
or whatever. So you try to curate the best that you can, and because you want to avoid being, you want to have a brand, I guess, and you also want to avoid being, singled out. You know.
Right. Well, and also on top of that, I think that, for so many people, whatever they're putting online, and this isn't 100% of the time, but uh a lot of the motivation is
Yeah.
monetizing, right? Is
Yep.
capitalist ventures to like make a living off of whatever, for so long, for so many younger generations, when you used to ask younger generations what they wanted to be when they grew up, a lot of them would be like president or a firefighter or something along those lines in the professional
Yeah.
realm. And for so many kids now, do you know what the answer
Influencer.
is?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? And so that's the thing, the influencer is really a
Yep.
salesperson, right? So that to me, that's what when someone says they're an influencer or they wanna be an influencer, it's like, "Oh, you wanna be in sales," because that's what drives
Right.
influence, like the influencing sphere
Yeah. It's all
online,
marketing and
and
sales.
it's all
Yeah.
commercial. Right, and so can you be authentic when you're just, like, trying to sell? And especially when you're trying to sell a version, a persona
Yeah.
of yourself, like, it's really
I don't know, but let's leave our subjective opinions about this behind for a moment. Just and let's do
Yes.
some definitions. I wanted to start off the authenticity part of this with a couple quotes that I found
Mhm,
that I really like. One is from Carl Jung, and that is the
mhm.
privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, which I think is
Mm.
really good.
Yep.
And we talk about these kids, and I think later, in midlife and later, you really start to think about, well, who am I? Wait a minute, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. You start to explore those kind of questions. And there's another
Mhm.
one here by Ralph Waldo Emerson that I really like, and that's to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment.
Yep.
And I think
Yeah,
that's true because we receive pressure from all sides to be
everywhere.
different things to different people, different things to different
Mhm.
institutions, different things to different
Yep.
countries, and yada yada yada. Goes on and on like that. So, what does it mean to be authentic? There's a psychologist named Carl Rogers that described it like this. He said, "The degree to which one is true to one's own personality, spirit, or character." Despite external pressures, which is what I was just talking
Mhm.
about there. It's about aligning your actions with your values and your beliefs. Yeah, stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah, and I would add to that, so I have a similar definition that of authenticity, and this is how I have come to define it. Authenticity is being in touch with and expressing your feelings, your desires, and your beliefs without significant distortion or suppression by social demands, past trauma, or external pressure,
Yeah,
right? And so, but I would also say that the trauma is, that can also kind of dampen our inner voice, our inner feelings, our inner desires. Also come from
yeah,
institutions and outside
sure,
sources quite often,
yeah.
right? So, yeah,
That's a really good. I like that expanded definition of it a lot. I like your definition better than Carl Rogers. Sorry, Carl. No,
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Take that, Carl.
Carl's fine.
Carl.
Yours is better. But
I don't know about that.
so there are three facets to the three requirements to being authentic in the first place. One is self-awareness, so understanding your true
Mm,
thoughts, feelings, and motivations, right? And most people don't even stop to examine that, so they're stuck at number one.
yeah,
Yeah, because there's not a
yep,
lot of self-awareness going on, or a lot of reflection going on, as far as we can see in the world. Number two is courage. You have to be brave to be authentic, because you're being
mhm,
vulnerable, because you're being exactly who you are at all times, and that means you may face potential judgment, for
yep,
that. And then the third one is consistency. So that's aligning your words and actions and your inner truth with each other all the time. And we sort of covered this in another episode when we talked about terms and conditions, right? It was our boundaries episode
mhm,
about that, and your terms being your unalterable rules that you live your own life by, that you give yourself, right? Like, I always tell the
yep,
truth, or whatever that is. And every time you add a condition to that, it waters it down, is the idea. So I always tell the truth, except when it's inconvenient, right? That's a condition on the first thing that then waters that down completely and makes you less authentic and less a follower of what you set out for yourself. Yeah.
mhm, mhm. It's interesting. Well, you got my brain jogging here, and I think that there is so much congruency between people who really are trying to find their authentic selves as the congruence is with integrity,
Hmm.
right? I just find that like the people that I meet that have a lot more self-awareness and self-reflection and take the time for that and that are trying to be true to themselves in that regard are often the most integrous because it's like the more authentic they are, the more that they are
Hmm.
boundaried about like the outside
Sure.
influences,
Yeah.
and that they are trying to extend that often. So it just it jogged my brain there. That's all
Yeah,
I wanted
no,
to say.
absolutely. That's absolutely the way it shows. Yeah, research shows that living authentically is linked to greater well-being and stronger relationships and a deeper sense of fulfillment. And we talk about
Mhm.
Brené Brown on the show, and she's known for her work on vulnerability. And she says that authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are, which I think is
Mhm.
another a great quote. Yeah.
Right. So I think a lot about this too, because I think for people who don't really take, they don't have like a practice like every day of like a mindfulness
Yeah.
practice, which I think is like really
Yeah.
crucial if you want to, is, it doesn't only mean meditation, like but having a practice to build mindfulness to bring you back to the present moment, I think it's the most critical thing about in trying to find your authentic
Mhm.
self, because we so many of us, if we got monkey
Yeah.
minds, right?
Yes, we all
Like
do.
the way I look at it, the human race is like the way our brains were developed by our ancestors were to be constantly scanning for
Hmm.
threats in our environment and in other humans as well, in order to
Yep.
survive. And so our brains are like that's like our ancient brain,
Yep.
right? And so we we're not getting chased by saber tooth tigers at this
Hmm.
point, or at least most of
Yeah.
us are not being like directly threatened by a lion. Um, but what we are, the anxiety that we have that we cultivate in our society and in ourselves often stems from that like that monkey mind, that like anxious chatter that we all have to varying
Yeah.
degrees. So I think like for those who don't have a mindfulness practice, you're just going to be reactive to the anxiety and the anxious chattering mind, and that you can't find your authentic self if you're always reacting to
Yeah,
that.
I mean, that voice in your head, I almost think of it as another outsider a lot of the times, right? Because your mind is telling
Mhm,
you things all the time. It's making up stories all the time, and usually it's doom and gloom
mhm,
stories. I mean, how often does your mind make up a great
mhm.
story, right?
Yep,
How often do you
exactly.
picture yourself laying on a beach with $1 billion thinking this is amazing? Right? It never pictures that.
Right.
It always pictures what's the danger next, like you said, right? And that's an ancient part
Mhm.
of us that goes in there. Also, what goes in with that and what we're going to start talking about in a minute here is the opinions of others, right? Because
Yes.
the same
Mhm.
thing evolves from way back, because if you were ostracized from the group, that meant death, right? Back then,
Yep,
right? Because the group was
yep,
your protection, it was your food, it was your everything, it was your complete safety, and
right,
it's not, it is still that socially, although it's not that physically a lot of the time, right? You can
right.
survive on your own, but that is still very strong within us to want to conform to a group so we fit in there and feel safer. you know?
Exactly, and that has only just gone into
Oh
hyperspeed
yeah.
with social
Yeah.
media, right? It's like and I think that's just like we are really starting to, well, not even just starting, but we're really gathering the data now to back up of like how damaging social media really can be, especially to young
Yeah.
minds, right? And it can really just how do you find your authentic self if you're spent most of your life looking on social media about like how you're supposed to quote unquote act and be in the
Yeah.
world, right? And like what persona am I going to try on instead of sitting with myself and really getting clear about what your values
Yeah.
are, what your life philosophy is, all those things about what matters to you. Most people don't stop to think about that for more than 2
Yeah.
seconds. And yeah,
And this
anyway.
goes back to another episode that we were talking about. We were talking about the birth of public relations in Edward Bernays, and how
Mhm.
much, after in the 20th century, how much advertising shift from, the benefits and strength of a product, on its like how long it lasted, and just the merits of what it had, to this aspirational thinking of, and that only follows us into social media of, well, you better have what the Joneses have, or if your
Right,
coffee isn't right, your husband's going to be wildly upset when he gets home, or something like that.
right.
All of these things are like pointing you to things that you didn't think about before, but then you think, oh yeah, well, if everybody's worried about their coffee, I should probably worry about my coffee. And you start
Yeah.
wearing that mask, and then you start wearing another
It's
mask that they tell you to wear, until you're just covered in masks and surrounded by crap that you don't need.
Well, it's so interesting. It's just like so much of ads. It's the psychology of advertising,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
propaganda, which is just essentially here's a solution to a problem that doesn't
Right.
exist, right? And then you're like, oh my god, do I have to think? I mean, I see it all the time, and in particular in my lifetime, that's really interesting to me is seeing the pressures for women to look a certain
Oh yeah.
way. Let's say in the '90s, which was I mean, it's always not been great, but, like, in the '90s, like, a size double 0 was, like, touted as the quote unquote "perfect body," and it was, like, really
Yeah.
unhealthy. It was, like it even had a name called heroin
Yeah. Yeah.
chic,
Yeah. Right.
right? And so and then, span 10 years, and then everyone's gotta look like they've got their Brazilian butt lifts and, like, their, the boob jobs and that, like, your body's supposed to look a completely curvy different way, and that is ever changing, and it's just these things are they're sold to
Yeah.
us. We're sold to all of us, but, like, in particular in that example for many women as how you're supposed to look in order to be enough, right? And, to be
Yeah. Well,
valued.
that's a good thing to say
So
because the basis of all of this stuff that they throw at you is you're not enough. You're not enough the
exactly.
way you are. And so,
Well,
yeah.
if you believe that, then that's where they can
Yeah, they've
control,
got you. They've got
they
control of
can
you
yeah,
then.
they
Yeah,
got you.
as soon as you think that about yourself, then they've got control of you. When when the truth is, your authentic self isn't out there. Like I don't I never like to use
Mhm,
the like find yourself because there's nowhere to go.
mhm,
Right? That's the thing.
right. Ooh,
Your
I like
authentic
that.
self isn't out there. It's here already. You just have to get back in alignment with who you are, I think.
Mhm,
And I've spent the last 10 years really aligning myself back with who I am at my core and and thinking about what I believe and how I want to be in the world,
right.
and that's been a great help to me. So the self-awareness part, I don't want to I just want to go back to that for a second because the self-awareness part, like you said, the meditation practice, the mindfulness practice that goes beyond meditation but is actually brings you back to the present moment again and again throughout your day
Mhm.
is so important to figuring out who you are and what you believe.
Yeah, and that's really where the
Yeah.
power is, right? And, like, that's what I'm learning more and more, and I think before I was, practicing every day, like a meditation practice every day and a mindfulness practice, and really having that as, like, right in front of me all the time like, a focus, is like trying to learn how to focus deeper, right? Especially when there's so much going on in our day to day and in our minds. But um, when I used to hear that, I didn't quite understand what it meant. I was like, I kind of think I have an idea, but I don't understand what that means. And now, 10 years into my meditation practice, I get it a lot.
Hmm.
Like I get the bigger picture a lot more. It's not that I get
Yeah.
it, like I'm enlightened, but I know what to focus on more now, and I can find myself catching when I'm zoning out or when I'm in anxiety. Like, the anxiety for
Hmm.
me is, like, really, like, the signal that I'm not
Yeah.
present. Um, like, anxiety to me or, like, anxiety and depression really boil down this way to me. It's focusing on either what did happen, what that didn't feel great or what could
Hmm.
happen, right? And both of those are just not part of the
For
present
future
moment.
past. Yep.
And it just consistently robs you of your energy, like that kind of mind loop. So my meditation practice has let me catch myself more often when I'm in that state of like being anxious about a future that is just a projection,
Yeah.
of my fears and the past, which is I can't change.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like the present moment is where I'm trying to find the power of like, okay, what can I focus on right now in order to feel better and so that I can do
Right.
better? And that is authenticity, that I think.
Yeah, I agree. I had that exact thing happen to me yesterday. I got some bad news on the phone from my contractor, and I was like, I just started to
Mhm,
spiral and think, well,
mhm,
if that's true, then what if this is true? Then what if that? I got totally future oriented, and my brain started to
mhm,
make up all these scenarios that weren't true, haven't happened, and all that stuff. And luckily, after having a meditation practice for as long as I had, I was like, okay, brain, that's a nice story, but that hasn't happened, and
right,
you can just put that down now. You can leave it alone.
right.
And my brain is obeying me more often than not these days when I catch myself in one of those thought spirals. And that comes from time. One thing about the
Mhm,
whole meditation and mindfulness practice thing is that it takes time. And like you said, it took you a while to get to where you're focusing on the right thing for you. It took me
Mhm.
a while to let go of having any achievement oriented thoughts about
Mhm.
meditation, right? Like, forget about
Right.
enlightenment, forget about getting better, forget about anything but sitting. And that's the key to it. And that's a hard thing to do because we're achievement oriented, right? And we want to, like, ooh,
Yep.
if I just meditate for 10 years, then I'll be the most enlightened person, it's not going to happen that way.
Doesn't
It
work
doesn't
that
work that
way.
way. It doesn't work that way. You need to sit and meditate because you love sitting and meditating, or you'll get there. If you don't love it at first, you'll get there where you do love
Yeah.
it, and you'll need it. And then from
Right.
there, it takes a lot of time to get into the mode where you can talk to your mind in a way where it actually behaves, because it is
Yeah.
a wild monkey, like you said. It's a very wild monkey.
It is. It's like, I joke that I've read before that we're just a bunch of shaved
Yep.
monkeys with anxiety issues wearing designer
Yeah,
shoes.
yeah.
So
Was it
it's kinda true.
Tom Bukowski has a quote about how we destroy ourselves with the minutia, and we're just monkeys with guns. Is what it is. Or something like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, I wanted to bank off what you were just saying there because I think, yeah, we definitely, at least here in the Western, world, really do, we're all about achievements, right?
Hmm.
And competition and all that shit. But, I think, like, we're so used to thinking that we need to do more in order to be
Hmm.
more, and what I'm coming to understand is that we need to be more, and then what we do, the quality of what we do will flow from being
Yeah.
present more and looking for, and when you're in presence, when you learn how, like, to truly be present in the moment, which is not easy, it's
No.
not, and also, it's like, unless you're like a monk on a mountain, I'm gonna say it's gonna be almost impossible for you to be present all the
Yeah.
time, right? Like, no one is present all the time because you also have to think about the future sometimes and, like, envision what the future should look like for you or what you want it to look like. So it's, there are those kind of things that you to work towards, for your desires or
And
whatever. But
when you're in some, like, therapy, like we are, you're going to think
yeah,
about the past as well. You might get not get, and you might get
absolutely.
carried away with it at this point or that point when you're
Right.
trying to work through your trauma from that era. So you do spend time
Right.
in both of those areas just out of necessity when you're a
Exactly.
human. So
But it's also in order to
yeah,
build, right? Like, you do those things in order to build, and you sit with that discomfort in order
release it. Yeah.
to well, and also I think, like, sitting in discomfort, that leads to
Yeah.
growth. But, like, sitting in pain can lead to
Yeah.
transformation, right? And so those 2 things are different, but only if you have the power of the presence to be able to see what the opportunities
Sure.
are around you and, like, train your brain in that way. But yeah, like, I think I really do think more so that, like, the more present that you can train yourself to become, the more power you have, to do from, like, your authentic
Yeah.
being of, like, what you wanna create in this world and for
Yeah, I liked what
yourself.
you said about being and less doing in there. We had a conversation
Mhm.
yesterday about something that I've been going through in my therapy, which is, like, realizing that I was fine. I was just when I was a kid, I was a happy, I was outgoing, I was
Mhm.
fine, and I was doing my thing, right? And then we all get interrupted at one point, right? Whether that
Mhm.
interruption is partially your parents, it's partially society, it's partially your teachers, right? They interrupt that flow
Mhm.
where you're like, okay, now you got to get in line and do this. Now you got to sit at a desk.
Yep.
Now you got to do this. Now you got to do that. You got to be this way. Don't be that way. All these things,
Yep.
right, that are like quote unquote education for you, somehow interrupting your natural flow of who you are, right? And it's not to say
Mhm.
that we don't need rules, and it's not to say that we don't need parents who set boundaries with us and things like that. Certainly we do, but we don't need a lot of crap, piled on us about exactly how to be in the world all the time through somebody else's lens, is what I'm saying, right?
Right.
There are basic morality things and basic boundaries we need to have with ourselves and with each other. But beyond that, like, I just felt like, if I had been left alone, what could I have been? That kind
I
of,
totally
yeah,
get that, and I grieve that,
yeah.
actually. I often grieve
Hmm.
that, and that's, like, part of the process, I think. But, you're touching on something that, I won't get super into, but I think that a lot of our current, like, modern educational systems, and they are systems, are geared in order to make, like, us perfect factory
Yeah,
workers,
yeah.
essentially,
It's the
and
whole
so,
idea.
and that's not authentic. It's like how to make people middle management if you're, like, in a quote unquote good school in order to make money to do the things. It's like it's just part of, like, the cog in the wheel,
Yeah,
for
absolutely. I mean,
what I
from
think.
this kind of schooling started in the Industrial Revolution, right? So we need
Yep,
factory workers, we need people to run the factories, we
exactly.
need all this stuff, and that's what it's
Now we need
basically.
people to
You're right.
code,
It's just basically gone on to
Mhm.
the information age,
Yep,
and when we get AI, it'll be something else that they want to direct it to.
yep.
But it's all directed to kind of keeping you in line. That's what, not
But
to
it
be a
also it
conspiracy
also
theorist.
signals to people who are like, "This doesn't feel like my jam, and this doesn't feel, like, good to me, but I have to do it." It really screws with our
Yeah,
psyches, right? And, like, and our authentic
yeah,
beings. The other thing I was gonna say is this is why I love dogs, because they are always
they are
authentic,
always
right? Like,
authentic.
they are always like, they're always exhibiting to you exactly how they
Yeah,
feel, and they are always in tune with how they feel, and so, like, that is, like, one of the if a dog doesn't like you, they're not gonna be like, "Oh, hey, just
yeah.
kidding," they're not gonna put up a
No.
front. There's no
No,
mask on the
and they don't
dog.
have the same relationship with guilt and regret that we do either, right? If they
Exactly.
bark at somebody, they're like, "Good, I did that. Great. On to the
Yeah.
next thing. Okay, I forgot about what's the smell?" That kind of thing. Yeah, I love that. We're like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
wasn't the best person I could be today." Like, give it up.
but they're always
Be a
present,
dog. They're
they're
always
always
there. Yeah,
present.
yeah.
They're not worrying about their death. They're not
No,
like
they're not worrying about what a good dog they are. Like, "Oh, could I be a better dog?" It's like
Exactly.
there's none of that stuff in there. You're right. I
They're
mean,
just
adapting a more dog-like view on everything would probably be
well,
helpful for all of us. Yeah.
isn't this why we love dogs
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
babies too,
Yeah.
like, and children? Because, like, again, you don't a baby doesn't come into the world and you're like, we're kind of ridiculous with our egos where it's like, "Great, thanks. You have, like, this perfect being that comes into the world." And then you're like, "Great, let's, take over and screw them
Right,
up
yeah,
by telling
yeah,
them everything that they're doing
yeah,
wrong in order to fit into
yeah,
society." It's just it's insane what we do. So,
it is.
yeah,
But
anyway.
so with that, let's go on to the other
Mhm.
people's opinion part of this. So
OPP.
it's OPO. Why do you keep saying
I know.
OPP? I don't
That's
understand.
alright because I just
You
want
just
to.
wanna say it. You
Naughty
just
by
love
nature,
Naughty by
that's all.
Nature so much. Are they from Philadelphia? I don't know. Where are they from? No, they're
No,
not.
I don't think I think they might be from, like, the Bay
Are
Area.
they? Oh, that would be
I don't
embarrassing. Are
know.
they from Oklahoma? Oh, if they're from
Ooh.
Oakland, that's really
I
embarrassing. I
mean, they
don't
might
know.
were they hanging out with MC Hammer? I don't know.
Anyway, moving on. So
Yeah.
so the dilemma here is, agonizing over what somebody else thinks of you or your choices or your work, and it's human nature to care
Mhm.
about others' opinions, but like when does the concern become a cage, for you?
Mm.
That's what you really have to decide. So why do we care so much about what others think? I mean, psychologists think, like I said before, it goes back to the fact that we're social creatures and we need to be part of the group or else we perish, and that's.
Well, yeah, and I'll add on to that,
Mhm.
right? So, yes, to that, and to add on to that, again, when I going back to, like, our primitive brain of scoping out where the saber-toothed tiger
Yeah.
is, what we were also scoping out in our environments to keep safe were other
Yeah.
humans that might have been in danger, and what we learned our brains learned is to really tune into, like, the, um, the minutia of people's facial
The social
gestures and
cues
their
and yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Whether they're squinting or, like, what their intention was behind their
Right.
eyes and things like that, and what that has changed to instead of, like that is now where there's not the saber-toothed tiger, but there's social media
Trolls,
and,
yeah.
like yeah, all the
Yeah.
things, right, of, like, trying to keep safe from people who might harm
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. And the other flip side to this thing is that we tend to add much more meaning to people than we tend to accord them much more. We think they think about us much more than they do. Is what I'm trying to
They're
say,
not thinking
right?
about
It's called.
they're thinking about
No, it's
themselves.
called and it's called the spotlight effect. There's a name for it in
Right.
psychology, right? The
Yep.
spotlight effect. And in reality, most people are too preoccupied with their own lives to scrutinize your choices or, as closely as you would imagine they did. And
Right.
Eleanor Roosevelt said something great about this. She said, you wouldn't worry so much about what others think of you if you realized how seldom they do. And
Yep.
I think that's absolutely true.
Our egos are amazing, aren't
Yeah,
they?
our egos are amazing. But having said that, I mean, that's generally about the group of humans. But we were talking about yesterday, Nora, about how we still do care about what other people think that are the closest to us, and
Yeah,
that's.
I think I care about what particular people who I respect think.
Mhm.
And, like, I'm sure if I were to get, like, dumb internet comments from wherever in the world, yeah, sure, that might sting a little bit, but it's not gonna, like, change me or whatever.
Yeah,
Or maybe I'll be like, "Well, let me see if there's maybe do a little reflection to see if there's something behind what they're saying or how they're saying it, if there's any kind of truth or whatever, I'm often trying to see from other people's perspectives and like give that like some thought just as to kind of challenge my view of myself, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
But putting weight onto what other people say without really asking myself, is it true?
Yeah.
Number
Yeah.
one, or like, is it, I don't know. Even if it's true, I think they're like, people often will say like, oh, well, I'm honest. And it's like, you can be honest without being brutally
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
that's,
agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's sort of what you said about, asking yourself, is that true? It brings it back to the Byron Katie and the work, what she does, which
mhm,
is, there's a 3-part process to that, is it
mhm,
true? Is it absolutely true? Like, can you prove that it's true? Like when you run up against
mhm,
something, somebody tells you something, you ask yourself these questions, and then you do a turnaround. Like, how could that be turned around, in there? But anyway, you all should
mhm.
read Byron Katie. I'm not gonna get way into that in this. But I wanted to say in the subject here that there's what other people think of your, I don't know, what other people think sort of in general, with you, people who know you, and then there's people who will sort of out of the blue attack you, right? And that's
Mhm.
the internet trolls, and also,
Yep.
I mean, if you work in retail, you have that happen to you sometimes, and those
Oh
things are a
boy,
little
do I.
different because you never, it's never
It's
about you.
projection.
It's
It's
always
all
about them. It's
projection.
all projection.
Yep.
It's all projection. It's all their trauma. And as we say around here, that's a them problem, right?
Yep.
That's not a you
Yep.
problem. That's a them problem. So with stuff like that, like if somebody's getting hot with me in the store or something like that over something silly, I'm like, okay, I don't get upset anymore. I start to think, okay, well, there's what's really behind this, and then I try to sort of put a salve on what's behind that and not take any of it to
Mhm.
heart, if I have to have
Right.
those interactions in there. But as far as people in my general life, people have opinions about my art, or people have opinions about this podcast, or people have opinions about, I don't listen to any of that stuff. It doesn't matter to me. I'm
Right.
just doing what I'm doing.
That includes the really good
Yeah.
ones, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's nice to get like, "Hey, I really like this," and that feels
Yeah.
good, but it's also not why we do it, right? Like, I kinda even just look at this, like, podcast as another creative venture in my life
Yeah.
to explore, like, a little deeper of how I think about things and, like, to get a little more clarity even for myself, and maybe that'll resonate with people, and if that connects people, awesome,
Yeah.
because I don't know, connecting people is one of, like, my, for lack of a better way of saying it, like a life
Hmm.
philosophy, right? And like that's something I know, I like the inner exploration that we're talking about with like being more authentic is I really, the things that like one of my philosophies is like, all right, every day is an opportunity to create more beauty and connection in the
Hmm.
world, right?
Hmm.
And like if this can facilitate that, awesome. I hope it does. But the audience comes last.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a Rick Rubin quote.
Right?
Yeah. The audience comes
Yep.
last. Yeah. I mean, you got to make
Yep.
what you make and put it out there. And then, the important thing is that you like it. That
Yep.
you think it has
Yeah.
value, or you think it is beautiful, or whatever that is, and
Right. Right.
not put any weight on, like Nora said, is the positive and the negative, right? So you can't, I mean, because
Mhm.
both are completely subjective, both are completely, that's, there's a them problem, and I guess there's a them pro, or something like that,
Right.
at the time. It's all the same thing, though. It's a subjective opinion on what you're doing, and people can think you're great and not think you're not great. And Kristen Chenoweth has this quote, like, you could be the sweetest peach on the tree and still somebody's gonna be hating peaches.
Someone doesn't like
Yeah,
peaches,
that's it.
right? You're not for everyone. You shouldn't be for
No, you
everyone,
should
really.
not be for
You should not
everyone.
be for
Thank goodness,
everyone,
if you
right?
don't have any detractors, you're not doing it right, right? If you don't, I
Mhm.
mean, if you're
Exactly.
not living, I don't think
Right.
you are living authentically if somebody's not like, "Hey, I don't agree with that," or whatever.
Mhm.
Not to say you need to be a dick about it or anything, but you know what I mean.
Right.
If you don't have anybody disagreeing with you, then you probably are just, you're probably blending in pretty well with the rest of the herd at that point.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'll say too, like, again, other people's opinions are just, again, it's that quote, opinions are like
Yeah.
assholes, man.
We've all
Everyone's
got
got
them.
one, and most of the time they
Yeah.
stink. So, yeah, the opinion thing, I don't know. I'm someone who tends to get a little more frustrated with people who just give like unsolicited advice
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
opinions, without like me asking for it. So that's just something I want to add to that. Like if you are someone who just like wants to tell everyone how you feel about their stuff without them actually asking for, that
Feedback, yeah.
solicitation.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe just like can it for once.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. But also from the other side, from the person receiving that criticism, it's good to take that as not as nothing personal
Personal
and
attack.
yeah, as just information, right?
Right. Right.
It's just information that's coming across, and it could be good information, it could be corrupted information, with their
And
stuff
I also
involved.
want to add, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
That's
off
okay.
there, Paul. No, I also wanted to add, it's like the difference between universal truths and personal truths. Like
Mm,
someone who is giving their opinion sometimes will not even realize it's their opinion. They'll think it's like a truth.
yeah, yeah,
And it might be their personal truth, but it might not be a universal
right.
truth. And personal truths should be, attended to and honored
Mhm.
uh, if they are, presented in a respectful way. I'll add to
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But also a personal truth might be varies from person to person. So, I don't know, like if someone has an opinion about maybe an art piece that I make and they're like, this isn't sensitive to the type of person or where my ancestors come from or like my culture, that might be worthwhile to be like, just actually listen to it and absorb it
yeah.
and just go, kind of think about it from their perspective and maybe work on that. That can be beneficial to make us better.
Mhm.
But if it's something that you're just like, I just don't like it
Yeah.
because it's okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
All
Again,
right,
my favorite word my therapist has ever given me, which is okay, as a response
okay.
to everything. Okay. I hate what you do. Okay.
All
All right.
right. I know,
I
right.
think you're terrible at what you okay. All right. It's fine.
Good for
Whatever it
you.
is, you know.
Is that right? I know.
Which
I
brings us
love it.
to the third thing here, which is other people's expectations, right? Or expectations. It could be your own expectations as well, right?
Mm,
And Annie Lamott, who's one,
the
she's
writer.
so good to listen to. She has a lot of wise things to say, I think, and I love this quote by Annie Lamott, which is expectations are resentments under construction. And it's
Ooh.
such a poetic way to say it, but it's so true. It's so true, right? And I think
Mm,
a few years ago I started working on really not having expectations when I approach anything, for the most part.
mhm,
There are some expectations that you just have, and you can't really help it. But a lot of things especially in terms of my output, my artistic output, I'm just like, I don't expect anything to be a certain way when I'm done with it, or the process to go a certain way. And then
mhm,
put that in your in your more personal life away from work, and you expect, you always expect people to be on time, you expect people to, you're in for a world of hurt, because the world doesn't work like that. People
mhm.
aren't always going to be
Yep.
on time, they're never going to act the way you want them to. That's one thing,
Mhm.
because they're people, right? And it's so
Yep.
having expectations around other human beings causes us so many problems in our
Well,
lives, and so much anxiety.
I will also say that if you do have expectations, to be incredibly clear about communicating those expectations to the people that that are important, to you for you to be heard.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean those expectations will be met, but if you can at least clearly and concisely communicate to people what your expectations are, whether that's like, I expect you to respect me, I expect you to, not touch my body, I expect you,
yeah.
those sorts of things. If they cross those, if they don't meet those expectations, then you can create the better
Right.
boundaries,
But in the end, they
right?
are those are kind of expectations. Everything you mentioned,
Mhm.
those are boundaries that you're setting with other people, right? So
Exactly.
I expect this basic, baseline of things, from this, and then, but what we're talking about here is more, and that is absolutely useful, and we will talk about boundaries more. But we're talking about more about,
Mhm.
other people's expectations for you, society's expectations for you,
Managing
managing
expectations.
expectations, family
Yep.
expectations, and even
Mhm.
our own expectations for ourselves. A lot of the time, it can feel like a heavy backpack we're constantly carrying around, weighing us
Yeah.
down and limiting our movements. And
But it's also,
no,
sorry,
go
I didn't
ahead.
mean to cut you
Please
off.
do.
No, I was also just gonna say, like, if you feel like you are always trying to meet others' expectations, then you're not in your own power,
Yeah,
right? Like, if that's your life is like trying to meet someone else's vision for you or, what they want, and you're just like a player to make what they want happen, you gotta think about what you want
yeah.
and your expectations for yourself, and if they don't coincide with someone else's, you're gonna have to choose you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm,
And so societal norms are the first ones that we usually deal with, right? The should, well,
mhm,
actually, familial norms are probably the first ones, but societal norms, the should and ought to messages we absorb from culture, and from the media, which is a little bit what we were talking about PR before, right? But also,
Right.
you need to be this, you need to be that, and those messages come down all the time. You need to be, if you're in this political party, you need to act this way. You need to be a patriot if you're here. You need to do this. We're an army family. You should definitely go in the army. There's all these things that happen, these expectations around you, and the familial ones are really hard, I think, because I still, as much as I know, I mean, my mother's had an issue with my hair since I was 18 years old, right? And so, like, I always,
You have awesome hair.
I
What?
know, man, I do have awesome hair under
You
this hat.
do.
But she's never liked the way I've cut it, and like since I was 18 years old, right? So like a while ago, I remember I had cut my own hair and I had combed it in a certain way that it wanted to go. And she's like, "Oh, you look great today." I went, "Oh crap, I gotta get back to the bathroom." That's not. But but those kind of, you should look this way, you should do that, all those things. I've always been so rebellious against anything that anybody told me about anything like that. It's like, I'm fine.
Um,
I don't need to, I don't need your opinion on anything I'm doing or wearing or all
Oh
that stuff.
boy, can I relate? I went to Catholic schools my whole
Oh,
life
right.
and had to wear a uniform.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, you wanna talk about, like, what is expected of you and, like, conforming to a certain model in order to make you into something that you might not feel like is actually
Yeah.
you. I mean, there's a lot. It's a lot. So I'm still unpacking a lot of that,
Yeah.
and so I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. But, those of us who have, like, specific, if we were raised in, like, any kind of religious upbringing, you might want to double check if those things still feel true to you, because that is really difficult to let go of. If there are certain things that are like dogmatic, that were drilled into you
Yeah.
from an early age through your life, and then you're like, but I'm starting to challenge this, or like it doesn't really feel completely authentic to me. It can be hard to break from
Oh
that.
yeah, especially if you've got religious stuff in your background and things like that,
Yes.
or a heavy-handed parent or something, that really drills into you.
Mhm.
This is the code of conduct that you need to
Yep.
live your life by, or it
Mhm.
happens a lot with ex-military dads, stuff like that.
Yep.
It's hard to live up to those examples, and live in that
Mhm.
same way. And there I think there's four. I think there's the top four, right? We talked about societal norms, family and upbringing, and then peer influence is another one, which we sort of
Mhm.
touched on before with social media and things like that, not wanting to be
Yep.
ostracized, really caring about their opinions, and also what their expectations are on how you're going to behave. And then your personal perfectionism is the last one, right? Which I
Mm.
often get caught up in, right? The often unrealistic standards you set for yourselves. I believe.
Did you happen to throw any, electrical things? Like, Paul, let's talk about this.
Nora's referencing a little project I was working on this morning and ended up smashing and throwing in the garbage before I got on this podcast. So that's where
So,
that
Paul, tell
comes
me
from.
about your own personal expectations.
Oh man, no, I'm zen as all get out. Forget it. I'm not going there. No, no, that is my big bugaboo, right? Is my personal
I
expectations
get
get
it.
in my way more than any other. And that perfectionism comes because perfectionism is stemmed from trauma, as we've talked about before, right? It's
Mhm.
a safety valve for you to, if you can be perfect and you can fix it and you can be the one, and
And you're enough,
and then
right?
you're enough. Well, then you're safe
Mhm.
is the
Right.
first thing.
Yeah, that's more of it.
And
Yep.
then you're
Mhm.
enough after that. You feel like you're enough, but you never really do in that situation, because you're always having to fix things. You're always having to be the one. You're always having to live up to that
Drive.
perfectionism all the time. That drive is constantly
Mhm.
in you, and that's why we can't leave ourselves alone and just relax at any point. Those of
Yeah.
us who are perfectionists and or people pleasers, because we feel like we're always managing the rest of the world around us, and that
Yeah, it's exhausting.
that does come from other people's expectations, and they just start expecting you to do that. That's your role then in the family or at work or wherever
Yep.
you're talking about, right? And it's a horrible place to be in, and an unrealistic thing to put on yourself and have put on you by others. But we volunteer for it as a people pleaser, right?
Right.
As a perfectionist, you volunteer for that pain.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I know I've been talking a little bit about, at least to you, Paul, about this show. It's called Couples Therapy.
Yeah.
And I'm totally hooked on this this show, and I got my husband, Kevin, hooked on it. We've been watching this, like, binge watching this particular show, but the show is, like, it's really well produced, and I think there's, like, a bunch in different countries now, but it follows, like, different couples that are going through therapy, with this one incredible therapist, right? And the thing that really, like, draws me in about it is not about, like, the drama between the couples or anything like that, but it's what really draws me in is that this particular therapist is incredible at what she does because she creates a safe environment for them to feel like they can eventually open up, and you start to see people like they're in their ego, they're in their traumatic shit without even realizing that they're projecting on each other.
Hmm.
And that's where like these like that's why they're in couples therapy, because they're like in these hard parts of their marriages. And she creates this like safe environment for them to like get more vulnerable,
Hmm.
and then like and she really is great at leading, like, guiding, not I should actually say guiding them to be able to communicate better with each other and to get in touch with the hurt traumatic shit from when they were younger, because it's always stems from that, and then show them the patterns that they're recreating
Hmm.
from that trauma,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
it's she's just like so good at it. And I'm like, I feel like I'm fairly good at like seeing that in different people, or like being like this isn't me. I don't know like their specific stories, but we often like I'm realizing how much we just are creatures of recreating these cycles and these behavior
For
patterns
sure.
that are unconscious or subconscious,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's exactly what you're saying. You can have an awareness that like you're a people pleaser, but until you get to like the heart of like why that you feel that way, you can't make better choices, and you're just going to recreate that, and you're not going to live authentically.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with everything we talk about. It all goes
Mhm.
back to the beginning. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what we both got from our EMDR therapy. Episode
Yep.
10, by the way, if you want to know about EMDR therapy, go back and listen to episode 10 where we interview my therapist and have her on. But the what I've learned about trauma is it's the stem of everything. It's everything misfiled
Mhm.
in your brain that's been knocking on your amygdala every time you get any input that triggers you
Mhm.
and makes you in that puts you in that constant cortisol bath of fight or flight, and
Yep.
to get those things back in the right part of the filing cabinet eliminates that you can't ring that bell anymore. That bell's not there to be rung,
Right.
and
The
that's
trigger is no longer triggering you. It's like, oh, you have a deeper understanding of yourself and your partner
yeah,
or whoever else you're just like of yourself, period, to be able to say like, oh, that's why that's why we're doing what we're doing,
right,
or that's why I get so enraged or so sad or so shut out,
yeah.
or all those
But the
things.
great thing about EMDR though is it's not just a cerebral breakdown of why things happened. It actually
Mhm.
also redistributes those things
Mhm.
into the right part of your brain. So you will know, sometimes you'll know why it happened. Sometimes you won't know
Mhm.
why it happened and it'll just be gone. It doesn't bother you anymore. It was connected to another trauma that you had that you were working on and you it didn't
Yep.
even come up. But all of a sudden, okay, I feel better. It's gone,
Yeah.
from that
Some
part
of
as
them are
well.
like the house of cards of,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, the
and
skin of
then
an
some of them
onion,
are like
whatever.
whack-a-mole.
Yeah, 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 no, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
absolutely
yeah.
true, and there's always more layers as you peel it back is the thing, and so we're just working on getting to the center of that onion all the time, and
Right, and isn't that the point of authenticity,
yeah,
is just peeling back those layers to get, like, deeper and deeper into who we are, why we respond to think or react really to what triggers us or to what moves us. It's really knowing yourself of what moves you and what makes you crazy,
yeah, and
and, like, why.
how much easier is it to drop stuff than it is to pick things up? I mean, just in life, right?
Absolutely.
And
Mhm,
the more you learn about all this stuff, the more and I said this before, it's all about subtraction. It's not about addition, especially later in life,
mhm.
especially after midlife, right?
Yep.
You start shedding
Mhm.
expectations, shedding, other people's opinions,
Shedding guilt,
shedding guilt, shedding your own perfectionism, shedding all these things.
shame.
It's just like it's like overheating when you're outside and just taking off the
Yep.
layers. And you just feel so good when you get to a layer that you can live with.
Or if you're naked.
Or if
I
you're
know.
naked.
Just get naked. No.
Nor and I just walk around naked all day long, except when we're doing this
No.
podcast. I put on a shirt and a hat for this, but otherwise, I'm free to be
You're
me.
yeah, if you're watching, you're just, like, naked from the chair down.
Yeah, no, neither of us are wearing pants right now. That's for sure.
That's
We
right.
are liberated individuals, ladies and gentlemen.
I am wearing pants, people, so
Yeah,
no, it's true, though, everything you said, yes, I agree wholeheartedly, and that's, like, what the wisdom that I'm coming to through, doing the hard it's hard work,
yeah,
that's the thing, it's like, it's hard work to really take a look at yourself because you have to look at your shit,
yeah.
right? And you have to be honest about your shit, and you have to try to shed another thing to shed, your ego,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Like, So and that can be really hard because the ego just always wants to fight you to stick around and
Yeah.
make the decisions. And yeah.
And not only that, I mean, it's an up and down ride, right? You're in and
Mhm.
out, up and down, and all this stuff. It's like with mindfulness. You're going to have days when you don't feel like you can connect to the present at all, right?
Yep.
You're going to have therapy sessions where you don't feel like in fact, you feel like you've backslid,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you're faced with something you thought you had dealt with already, and there you are again. And the trick is don't take that up, don't put that on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just what's happening, and it's part of the process, right? Going
Mhm.
this back and forth thing in and out of the present, in and out of our states of being when we talk about therapy and things like that. That's all just part of the process. Those things are going to happen. You're going to feel like you're backsliding sometimes. Maybe you are backsliding sometimes. That doesn't mean you've failed at therapy, right? And it
Right.
just means that, it's you have to go back and visit that stuff and be in that to see the difference, to differentiate between, right?
Mhm.
And the
Yeah,
universe will
sometimes
put
it's
you
3
back there.
steps forward, 2 steps
Yep.
back, 4 steps
Absolutely.
forward, 1
Absolutely.
step back, but
And that's why a lot of
the
people quit therapy for that reason, I think.
yeah,
And a lot of people don't take it up in the first place because what you said, Nora, it's really hard to look at your shit. And it's really
it
hard to
is
be
because you have to
honest.
own it.
You have to be honest about your shit, and
Absolutely.
but it's so liberating, man. It's such a liberating thing to get beyond
Yep.
because you can get beyond it. So you can get beyond a lot of your shit. And it's
Right.
so liberating when you do.
Well, and once you see those patterns and once you see, like, the stuff that is actually not authentically you and it is, like, someone else's expectation that you thought was you or whatever it is, but, like, once you start seeing that and you can shed it or you at least you're aware of it, then you can see when it pops up easier in your life, and that's when you can actually be present and make different choices so that you're not recreating the patterns that we all tend to do,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. All right, let's talk about some things. Let's talk about some strategies real quick for the three
Mhm,
categories that we did, so we can kind of tie this up on a practical note, right? So strategies
mhm,
for cultivating authenticity, self awareness is what we talked about there. So developing a deep understanding of one's values, beliefs, and desires is crucial for authentic living.
mhm,
So I think that's a good place to start. Just
mhm,
start with a question like, who am I? What am I
mhm.
doing here? Who have I been? Am I the person that do I feel authentic? Do I feel like I am all the time who I really am?
Yep.
Mindfulness is the second one. Practicing mindfulness help individuals stay
Mhm,
present and act in alignment with their true selves. Values clarification, which you talked about a little bit. So
yep.
identifying, prioritizing personal values that can guide authentic decision making. Self compassion. That's where I fall down a lot of the
Yes.
time. That's where a lot of us fall down a lot of the time. Is being kind to yourself in the face of mistakes or perceived failures, and that can support authenticity. I'm getting better at that, but that has been a real I can be real hard on myself sometimes, and then
Mhm,
boundary setting is the last one in that list for authenticity. So learning to set healthy boundaries with others, you can protect your authentic self that way, right?
yeah.
So that's the. Did you want to say anything about those on the?
Yeah, I've got some to add
Yeah,
on,
go for it.
that are, congruent with what you had to say, but, one is surround yourself with wise people
Yep,
or wise books
yep.
or just, like, with wisdom, like, seek wisdom in people and in material and content,
None of this
like,
is new
that's
under the sun, right? Yeah.
right, exactly. Another is, write or journal,
Hmm.
and, when you write or journal, even if you like hot pen stuff, or you do morning pages or something like that. If you don't know what morning pages are, it's just like getting up and like writing stream of conscious like in the morning for 15 minutes or so.
Tell the listeners
But
what hot pen is as well. Usually,
hot penning is just like kind of exactly like writing from stream of conscious, like just what is coming up in your brain
not
and
editing. You just
writing.
go.
Not
You just
editing.
go
Yeah,
until you
you
can't go anymore. Yeah.
exactly. Like set a timer and do that. But then like look try to go back and choose see what words are coming that you're using,
Hmm.
right, more often, and circle those words that are, like, coming up several times and take a look at those if, are they words that are affirmative or are they negative, right?
Yeah.
And that might be something that might be a little window into how your brain is really, um, wired,
Yeah.
and if you need to rewire that.
Yeah.
Um, again, the mindfulness practice thing, it's like that I think that's one of the most crucial and asking yourself when you are either in meditation or just like trying to be focused on presence, ask yourself the question, who am I? And then just the mindfulness part is trying to listen in and tune into your inner world that's going to attempt to answer that
Yeah.
and listen to that.
Yep.
I was going to say, list the people that inspire you and then write down the characteristics that they embody and what is it about them that draws you in, and that's probably a signal to what you want to become or who you really are. Invest in your mind and your craft. That's like another, and then I'll go for like the symbiotic relationship that I'm coming to understand more so is like you can train your mind, you can train your craft, and you have to train your body too. And like I don't mean that you have to like go marathon train, but you have to engage all three of these, and like in whatever way that feels good to you. But they're all symbiotic.
Yeah, agree. Okay, on to other people's opinions and what we can do about those, right? So one thing is develop self-trust, right? Build confidence in your own judgment through small, consistent decisions. Practice mindfulness again. Reframe criticism. So see it as information rather than a personal attack, which is what I mentioned before. Surround yourself with supportive people. Create a circle that encourages growth and authenticity. And that's not just a wisdom, group, but that can be, your friend group. It should be
Right.
it should be the people you surround yourself with have a tremendous influence on you. So surround yourself with the right people, and then remember your values. Make decisions based on what truly matters to you and not others' expectations.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like really knowing your values with that. And that way if other people do have a critique and it goes against your values, you can stand firm in that and like maintain your personal integrity. I would also add to that just like really learning active listening.
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that, some people will say something, but you have to listen to what they're saying behind the words because a lot of people are really not great at actual clear communication.
Yeah.
And so if they're saying one thing, you can maybe get to the heart of what their real issue is, or if it's actually about you or if it's about them, and maybe kindly reflecting that back to them.
Yeah, good stuff. There's some things that you can do things you can engage yourself in to help yourself here. CBT is one, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. That's different than EMDR, but CBT can help reframe thoughts and other about others' opinions and reduce their impact on you. That's another kind of talk therapy. Exposure therapy, which is gradually facing fears of judgment that can desensitize individuals to others' opinions. Self-validation, learning to validate your own experiences and emotions can reduce reliance on external validation. Growth mindset, which is something you talk about a lot, Nora. Adopting growth mindset can help reframe criticism as opportunity for growth rather than personal attacks. And then social support, again, which is surrounding yourself with accepting people who support you.
Yeah. The last thing I'll add to that is like just learning how to build up your confidence. And confidence is not innate, really. We've talked about this before, but like start small, get small wins so that you can build that confidence so that like you can be more in your own personal power and understand yourself better. Especially when it comes to people who might be critiquing you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say as a caveat to that, don't put on confidence if you ain't feeling it. Right. I mean, don't put it on because it's not,
that's fake. It's not
fake.
authentic. If you're not feeling
it's
it.
Not authentic. If you're not feeling it, it's not authentic. And so don't try to be confident in situations where you're not confident.
Ask any woman who's been approached by a man who is not actually confident.
Right. Yeah.
You can sense that in a heartbeat.
Explain how that interaction goes, Nora. How does that usually go?
Oh boy. Well, let's see. I mean, there's plenty of things in my past that didn't go well, but this is not a great story, but there was one time I was with my old roommate, little Nora, and we were waiting for our other roommate at a bar, and little Nora and I were having like this heart-to-heart conversation. And if anyone who had any social skills saw us, they would understand that we were in a deep conversation and not to interrupt us.
Yeah.
But these two guys at the time, we were in our 20s, so it was a ridiculous time. But this one guy came up and just, started interjecting. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. We're having a conversation here, but thanks so much. Trying to be polite, but like kind to it, like, okay, great. And he just kept coming in more to show that his, to his buddy that he was like confident and going to like score.
Yeah.
Quote unquote. And then he put his hand on my leg I looked at him and I said, take your hand off my leg. And he said, no. And I said, if you don't take your hand off my leg, either the bouncer and if he's not going to do it, I will throw you out first. And it just kind of escalated from there until he got thrown out of there. So
I have a small
that's arrogance, not confidence.
No, that's arrogance. But I do have a small bit of compassion for that guy in that he didn't know he had walked into a bear trap. That's the problem.
Little Nora just kept laughing and going, dude, you don't want to do
this.
Going,
she's from Philly, and not a good part of Philly.
Oh man, it was not great. Like when I got up,
Yeah.
and I think I towered over him too, which was like didn't help because I
Right.
would have been sitting, and he was like, "Uh-oh."
Uh-oh.
Like his one friend looked like this is so bad. His one friend looked like, "Oh shit."
Uh,
And then like he was trying to save face, and then they both kind of took off as I like went to the door to the bouncer,
uh,
and there was a woman who worked there, and I was like, "There's a guy over here who's really being a problem."
yeah.
And wouldn't take his hands off me when I told him. And the woman was like, "Who?" And I, like, turned around and I saw him as they were, like, trying to run through this very small, like, crowded bar
Uh-huh.
and, like, run away, and she was like, "That guy was giving me shit at the door." Like, so they just went right after him
Oh
and threw him
dear.
out, and I was like, "Bye."
Oh dear.
Anyway,
Oh, our
boundaries, man.
20s. Boundaries, man.
Oh, I
There you
know.
go.
Anyway, don't do that.
No,
Don't do
don't
that.
be doing that. All right. So, last one here, freeing yourself from other people's expectations, right? So,
Mhm.
identify the expectations is one thing you can do, right? Because be aware of shoulds in your life, where do they
Mhm.
come from? You know,
Don't shit all over yourself.
yeah, don't should all over yourself. I love that. Where'd you get that from? I love that.
I didn't make
You
it up.
didn't
I
make,
forget.
no, it's got
But
it.
you've never heard of that?
No, well, it's like it sounds like a
I
Tony
love that.
Robbins thing, or it
Yeah.
sounds like a self help thing. But yeah, but I
Oof.
still like it. Don't shit all over
Yeah, I do
yourself.
too.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Snappy.
Yep.
Question their validity, right? So ask yourself: is this expectation truly aligned with my values and my goals? Redefine success for yourself. So create your own metrics for a fulfilling life rather than adopting others' definitions. And I got to tell you, that's been a huge part of my 50s. Huge,
Mm,
huge part of it. Like,
yep.
why do I have to do all these things? Like really examining, right? Why have I
Right.
adopted all these other people's definitions of what success is when success
Mhm.
to me never felt like those things anyway? It's just like
Yep.
ridiculous. I've been wearing that mask for a long time, and in my 50s, I finally took it off, and it feels so good to be free of that. It feels so good to be free
Yeah.
of that.
Yep.
The next one is practice saying no. So set boundaries and decline commitments that don't align with your true self. That is almost everything that people ask me to do. Do you want to do this? No.
Hey, Paul, you wanna
No.
give me $800?
Yeah, no.
Nope.
No. It's more like going out and things like that. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
as we've discussed before, it's if you know, after
It's
midlife,
gotta be good, man.
if
It's gotta be good to
it's
motivate
got to be
me.
better than home, you know,
Yes,
to get
and
you
that has
out.
my
And
dog, which is pretty
very
spectacular.
few things are better than
But
home for me, man. I love being at home, and there's very few things that will get me out to mingle with the rest of society while I
yeah,
do that.
a little too peoply out.
That's way too peoply outside. Yeah, way too peoply. So practicing no, that's a really good one. No is a complete sentence, as we've said in
Yep.
another another episode of our podcast. like we're putting out a zine,
That's a
Nora.
little Freudian
That's
there.
right. That's it.
Tell me about your issues,
There you
Paul.
go. The next one is embrace imperfection. So remember that all growth comes from mistakes and failures, and we talked about
Mhm.
that before, and how that's hard, and how it keeps a lot
It's
of
part of the
people,
process,
yeah,
though. Yep.
yeah, from succeeding in therapy. And then cultivate self-compassion again, right? Treat yourself with the same
Mhm.
kindness you'd offer a good friend. You know,
Yeah,
make
I
friends
like
with
it.
yourself.
I don't know that I have anything to add to that.
Oh, well, it's a miracle.
No. All right.
All right. All to say, though, in the end, I think I'll just wrap up by saying it has been so important for me to come back to myself,
Oh god,
to
yeah.
come back to who I feel I am, and to align all of my actions and all of my thoughts and all of my statements with that person has been
Mhm.
absolutely life changing for me. I'm a completely different person now than I was in my 30s, I feel like, and
Yeah,
that's all
thank
about
God
that.
we are.
I know, right? And sorry if you're in your 30s, you're going through it. 30s, 30s are better
No, I
than
mean, it's all
20s,
part
but
of the
they're
process.
hard. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is there's nothing wrong with being in your 30s or
No.
your 20s or whatever, but it's like if you're in your 50s and you're, like, not actually growing and you're becoming more rigid or, you're not really exploring why you are the way you are,
Yeah.
then I don't know, like, you're just that's stale water, man,
Yeah,
like,
we talked yesterday when we were on the phone about the calcification that takes you
yeah.
over, and you don't
I
even
mean, you
know
see
what's
it in
happening. You're
older
just getting,
people
yeah, you see it in older people. You're just
all
getting
the time.
stiffer. You're just getting
Yep.
more
More
fearful, more
rigid, more yeah.
rigid, more less open-minded, all of those things.
I meet people who become more rigid and who don't explore their shit because it like again, either there's not awareness of that or that it's like too scary and like it's like, well, I don't want to think about that because it's painful.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like I get it. And if it's that painful, like hopefully you can get a good professional help you through that.
Yeah.
But we've all met the older people that are like get off my lawn,
Yeah.
and like, becoming more rigid and don't like the world that is always changing and always
Yeah.
evolving, that they're not changing or evolving with it because it wasn't, they're holding on to this identity, this mirage of an identity that they don't know who they truly are. They think they are, they need to be the way they were in their 20s or their 30s and think the
And not
same
only
way,
that, but the
right?
world needs to be the way it was in their 20s and 30s. That's
Exactly.
the thing. And
Exactly.
that imbalance between the two is what is so triggering to
Right.
people who don't keep moving and don't keep, and it goes back to, I mean, I said, the kids these days, but I was I don't ever say
No,
that.
I know.
I love the kids these days.
Of course, they're great.
They're always great. They've never not been great, and they're not that different from kids 100 years ago.
Right.
They're all in the same thing. So yeah, I try not to let myself get calcified into those
Yeah.
opinions. Like,
But
it
it
was,
takes work though.
yeah, it does take work. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
does seem like it was better in the 80s. Sorry, it's for
I
me.
mean,
It does seem like it was better some, but then you
yes,
remember.
and
Yeah,
right. Like,
yes, and
I think there are certain things that were there was more freedom in some aspects,
yeah,
and then there were things that were less free in other aspects, right? And so, it's not that it was better or worse; it was just different
yeah,
to me, and like that difference, like I at least have the length in my age
hmm,
to be able to look back and see the differences, unlike someone in their 20s who can't look back,
yeah,
right? And this is why it's important to have friends from different generations,
sure,
right?
yeah,
Friends who are older who can give you the wisdom of what they've learned and hand that off to you to make so that you can learn to make the world a better place and your own world a better place and your inner world a better place. But you also need young people in your life so that they can also like teach you the new ways of thinking and
yeah.
the new like evolving that and
The
how
way
it
language is
feels.
evolving. I mean, young people are
Absolutely.
the North Star for the way language always evolves in there. And if you
Absolutely.
don't evolve along with it, then you're lost.
And you're groovy. No.
Then you're groovy, man.
You're a hep cat.
You're at L7 square, baby. Look out. I'm gonna use some
Trying to find like all the old sayings
like anything Maynard G. Krebs said on Dobie
yeah,
Gillis. That's you don't even know what I'm talking about,
I
do you,
don't even know
Nor?
what
You
you're
have no
talking
idea
about.
what I'm talking about. That's funny.
Is
That
it cap? No cap, man.
no
No,
cap. Yeah, no
I don't
cap. I
even
know
know
what
what
you're
like
talking about. Anyway,
for real, for real.
for real, for real. Anyway,
Anyway,
we've gotten to it, I think, with the authenticity. I just wish you well, listener, on your journey to it, on your journey back to
yep,
yourself. I hope you do engage in it because it is entirely worthwhile to do so. And it is
yeah,
hard
there's
work,
freedom.
but on the other side of it is you get your freedom back.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's no small thing these days.
absolutely.
To feel like you are free in any part of your life is a big
Oh
deal
man,
these
ain't
days.
that the truth?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yes, it
Anyway.
is. Excellent.
All right. Well, Nora, I love you.
I
Listeners,
love you too, dude.
we love you too. And we shall see you next time for a full episode here in the studio. And we will see you later.
Thanks for listening.
Freedom, freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything you've heard on the show, please feel free to drop us an email at ifweonlyknewthenpod@gmail.com.